Aloha, and welcome to another Candid Conversation. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Sara Hanks, who's been one of our contributors in writing blogs. Today is our first opportunity with the podcast. You can see the smiling face beside me. Welcome, Sara. Glad you could join us.
Oh, Ron, I'm so grateful and happy to be here today.
Sara is a particular talent that got our attention months ago. For what she does. So maybe if you could and would, Sara, give us a bit of your background as to how you got to where you are now.
Sure. My career started a couple decades ago. I started out as an engineer working at GE. It was the greatest place to land a job after college, that was for sure. I worked in engineering and manufacturing for about 10 years. Many roles focused on like Lean Six Sigma black belt and quality engineer on the shop floor. And about, I think 11 years ago, I took over as being a project manager for implementing an IT system to manage all of quality. And since then, my roles had really been defined by that digital transformation. And what I mean by that is you have a business process, and how do you optimize that business process, then digitize it to really make it more efficient. And then that in turn creates data. And you can do all sorts of analytics on that data, including, machine learning to help drive business decisions. And I would say half of the last 10 years have been focused really on the data side, and the other half were really more on the software implementation side.
It's an amazing point in time, isn't it? Where technology, which let's say it's been around 80 years, go back to 1940, just as a benchmark. The transformation, Moore's law with doubling capacity, halving price every 6 months, 18 months, 12 months, whatever you want to get to, is so outdated now. Things have changing so quickly. And what got my attention with you originally was your GE background, because of the Lean Six Sigma, that whole transformation that I guess Jack Welch is the one that was the principal architect of that. Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely a fair comment.
And one of the things that he did that really turns me on is having his GE University, where he used to go and teach at it occasionally, right? Were you involved in any of those?
Oh, I was fortunate enough to attend, I think, 5 or 6 trainings at Crotonville, which was GE's training facility.
Right. So earlier this week, you were a guest at a LinkedIn live session. Mm-hmm. What was that all about?
So the podcast, or the LinkedIn Live, is called What's the Buzz? And the purpose of it is really to demystify artificial intelligence and educate people on the different language. And I was invited to be a guest because in my previous role, I was a leader within the organization, and I had a team of data scientists and product owners, and we implemented projects that included things like artificial intelligence. And I was asked to be on it because I had been in that position before. And right. My objective was to talk about, like, what are 3 things that we could tell people who are moving into like an artificial intelligence COE leadership role, or a director of analytics, or something along those lines. And so, my 3 lessons in that, the first one is you need to find early adopters, and they will exist. It takes time to flush them out. Yeah. But it's important when you're trying to do something that's scary, like artificial intelligence, to find somebody that you can partner with to really have some early success. But the other part, and it was a lesson I kind of learned the wrong way, was you need to keep them engaged throughout the whole process. In my first AI project, we have an engine that gets tested, and there's a bunch of sensors that are on it. And the criteria is each sensor has to be within a certain range for it to pass. Well, if you have 1 out of 25 sensors that are bad, the process was take the engine out, wait for the engineer, and then put it back in and they would look at data. So our goal was to take and provide a real-time recommendation using machine learning to the engineer, and they could save that whole like tear down process and speed up the disposition of, is it a good engine or a bad engine? We encountered a number of technical issues along the way, and it took a year to get the project done. And so while the analytic was great and accurate, people stopped caring because we didn't engage them
Right.
consistently along the way.
Yeah, and the longer the task, the harder that is.
It is.
It's
It
unbelievable.
is.
It's almost like we're children again. Our attention spans.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, it was, oh, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. But
You
I
gotta
mean, they
have,
could have.
you gotta have the strength to hang in there, because there is no end, and you're pioneering. And that engine issue was, yeah, like you say, the facts are straight. It's easy. It's clear. How you get to where you need to be, though, from those facts, that's not clear. That's trial and error. It's lots of failures. And after a while, people say, at least my experience, oh, I don't want to do this anymore.
No. And it was, I mean, this was 7 years ago too. So the technology wasn't, it wasn't there. Right. So, and we were engaging the smartest brains in San Ramon, which was where GE's office was. Right. So, but yeah.
And the third point was?
I think that as a leader in an organization like that, you need to think like somebody in marketing. And I think that's something that I had probably not done enough of as the leader in that role. I think you need to know what use cases are going to be relevant for your audience, and go after things that they're going to align with and care about. And then also change your messaging to suit your audience. If you're communicating with a leader and they don't understand the jargon of artificial intelligence, then drop the jargon and simplify your message and make it easier for people to understand. And then the last one, and you've talked about this before on your podcast, is that fail fast. Right?
Isn't that the truth?
Know when to give up the ship.
Yeah, and human nature is not to give up.
No.
It's rather intriguing. I in the lead up to this, before we started, I was mentioning Jack Hawkins at Troy University, and one of the things that he and I talked about was, I said, okay, fine, you've been doing, he's in his late 70s, he's been a dean or chancellor for the last 45 years. I said, okay, what are we missing today? When kids come to your schools, whether it's undergraduate, graduate, whatever, what's missing? So he came back and said, okay, first of all, critical thinking skills. Secondly, analytical skills. Thirdly, communication.
Wow.
And then he said, on top of all of that, what's bothering me more now, he doesn't see leadership. He doesn't see leaders today like he used to 20 and 40 and 60 years ago. And if you think about it, that's pretty valid.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about kids and the social media and the way they communicate is all through the screen. It's pretty hard to develop leadership skills when you're not interacting with people.
Yeah, we have to. Yeah, it's going to be something else. One of the things that I'm excited about, but bothers me, artificial intelligence and data analytics are so far ahead of the human condition right now that we have no idea what it's going to do for us. And we probably are looking down the barrel of two of the most powerful tools that mankind has ever had. If you look at the mass amount of data we got, that hardly anybody transfers into information that we can use. And that's where artificial intelligence can shorten this trip dramatically.
Absolutely.
So what kind of resistance do you get with all your background, all your experience, with what you do in your work today with different companies? What's the biggest obstacle that you're seeing?
I think the first is, I mean, there's a resistance to change, but I think that peeling back that onion a layer, it comes down to a fear of having something do something better. And it's like a threat of you're taking away how I validate myself because something else can make a decision without me. But I think artificial intelligence without human interaction is a dangerous space. I mean, I think no matter what, you need to have oversight. So I think that thinking is limited and you don't need to necessarily take away decision making, but you certainly can accelerate it and substantiate those decisions using artificial intelligence and machine learning and save a person time or build up their confidence more. Like,
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? It shrinks the time gap.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you remember the experience with Big Blue and IBM beating Kasparov?
Vaguely.
What IBM did was they loaded every chess game known to man into the computer.
Okay.
So then they sat the computer Big Blue across from Kasparov, the best chess player in the world in those days. And they beat him. But the only reason they did was because he could go through all of the table,
All the combinations,
the boards, faster than Kasparov could.
Yeah.
About 5 years ago, another group taught the computer the moves, only the moves of the chess pieces. Nothing else, the rules and the moves.
Okay.
That artificial intelligence has yet to be beaten by anybody.
Because it doesn't have
Nobody
the
knows how to
context.
deal with it.
Yeah.
It's looking at, it's fresh eyes on an old problem, right? Which is
Yeah.
what, you know, if you look at medical, General Electric, take all the data history of healthcare in America, they put data analytics on top of that with artificial intelligence. You go to the doctor, I had this blood work, I got this age, I got this genetic makeup. Ron, 92% of the time, this is going to happen to if this, you know, we're coming down to a place that's going to be really exciting.
That is extremely exciting. I mean, think about how many times you go to the doctor and it's a standard diagnosis, and yet we're all unique individuals. We all have unique history. And then, you know, that was one thing I just loved about GE was the whole concept of a digital twin and the opportunity that exists in healthcare. And I think their systems are so disconnected and it's going to take a long time to get there. But to know that a prescription is being given, and I'm not necessarily talking about a pill form, but whatever that is, right?
Yep,
That's
yep.
unique to you, that's based
Yep.
on your blood type,
Yep.
your, you know, whatever, all the chemical makeup and your history and your genetics and all of that, I think could really, really change the game. I remember having, and this is, I remember having a conversation with my dental hygienist, and she said that there's two types of patients, and she doesn't have the data, it's just her experience. She's like, there's patients that experience issues with their teeth and there's patients that experience issues with their gums. And I'm like, oh, it would be so cool to have an algorithm that could identify early if you were, you know, type A or type B, and then have all of your preventive care based on that, right? And so if you're a person and you experience gum issues, you should go get your teeth cleaned more often, right? As opposed to if you have a teeth thing, you maybe can, I don't know, it would be different on the teeth side, but
Well, your enamel might be thinner than somebody else's, and as a result of that, you got to stay away from sugar.
That's right.
Or something as fundamental as that, but we don't even think that way today.
Nope. It's just every single person is treated exactly the same. And I think it's more expensive down the road because
no question. It drives me crazy. Here's a crazy one, but related but different. In the 1800s, the Emperor of China banned acupuncture. The medical community in those days, there was no medical schools in those days.
Okay.
The medical community looked at acupuncture as magic. And the emperor did not like the way that the country was being presented by these outsiders.
Okay.
Mao in 1949, after the revolution, brought acupuncture back.
Wow. I did not know that.
Well, I'm full of all kinds of weird things because I read like an idiot, but there's a good example from, acupuncture works. Don't ask me to explain it medically, but it works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Imagine having that database. Doctors
my
are
gosh.
reputed to be the worst business people on the planet. They got paper files everywhere and they don't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a salesman. That machine's going to last 15,000 hours. It's got 14,500 on it. A salesman better go talk to that customer and replace that machine.
Yeah.
And if you had the same kind of thing, a friend of ours is having a pacemaker put in. If her blood pressure or her heart rate changes to a different, she gets a text message on her phone asking you to modify her behavior.
Wow.
We've got different things coming at us.
Yeah.
To your point originally on the fear and consciousness that artificial intelligence and data analytics are going to replace people. I'm a little bit older than you. I'm going to give you at least that much. But originally, when computers came, there were cartoons in the 60s with a computer being replaced or a person being replaced by pushing a button on a computer. And that was the way it was sold to the world.
Mm-hmm.
I remember walking into a warehouse in Stuttgart, Germany in 73, into the distribution center for Kodak.
Okay.
Huge place. When I walked in the door, the lights went on. There was nobody there. All run by computer.
Wow.
Phenomenal. We have things we don't have any idea, and the human experience isn't broad enough, right?
Yeah.
Your training at GE took you from where you came out of university
mm-hmm.
with what the tools were you had. I'm going to suggest that those tools were magnified 3, 5, 10 times. Fair comment?
Oh, sure.
And yet GE is unique. They don't offer more training to the management team than any other corporation in America, to my knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of what is the appeal of working there. I mean, it's obviously changed now because they're a different GE, but.
So stay there for a second. That's what wants you to go work there. A certain category of people want to get in there because of what they can gain from it, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
The challenges they're presented with.
And the
problems
opportunity
that they're asked to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you read my blog from this past week. It was, is the employee an asset or are they a tool in a toolbox? Too many employees are tools in the toolbox.
Yeah.
And engagement, like you talked, that's been the number one reason that people are changing jobs. The employee doesn't feel engaged in what they're doing.
Yeah.
So you're in the forefront of all this stuff. You're kind of a pioneer. Is it hard to get your business going?
I think, yeah, so it's hard to get the business going. I think.
Now let me ask you a question, because you cover so many aspects of the commercial enterprise. Is it data analytics? Is it project management? Is it artificial intelligence? Is it software? Is it implementation? Where, like, you've got so many points of expertise. How do you channel your efforts to maximize your effectiveness?
That's a great question. I mean, I think investing in, well, I think they're related. I honestly, I think
Absolutely. There's
all of those
synergy for all of
expertise
them.
build on each other, right?
Yeah.
It starts with having a good understanding of the value of a standard process, and then wrapping a system around it, and then implementing that system and the change management that goes along with it, and then the data analytics. That's a continuum in my mind. And then project management is just how you get it done. So I don't know if I don't know that I compartmentalize the areas of expertise as much as it kind of builds on itself. But in terms of like, how do you, I mean, I think for me, I'm trying to invest a lot more time in planning and deep work and carving out moments to really think on those specific areas, whether it's to craft a blog or to focus on the product development for my software company, or to solve a problem at where I'm employed.
One of the things, and we talked about leadership in a bunch of different directions. I'm not so sure that each job function is not going to be a project.
I don't know how it's not.
I agree. But I don't know that, if you look at a job description at a corporation,
Mhm.
that doesn't describe a job function. Tells me what I expect you to do.
Absolutely. It's a task list.
Yeah. And yet, and people are saying, wait a second, I'm not being engaged. I'm not being asked how I can improve things. They want to. I think there's a thirst for that. Are you seeing that?
I definitely think so. People want to improve things unless they're to the point where they haven't had the opportunity and they become jaded. I mean, that's worse than an employee leaving in my mind, but
I agree. They've been left behind.
yeah, and they're just functioning at that point and checking the tasks off the checklist. But I think, yeah, other than that, people are thirsty to have an impact.
It's probably more generational than anything else. Baby boomers, I think, are rather seriously risk averse.
Mhm.
Protect the status quo. Let's not change anything. And the younger millennials, X's, Z's, even my grandchild, I think they're calling that alphas. Those guys don't want to wait, guys and gals. Come on, let's go.
No.
Let's change this stuff. This doesn't work. Come on.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
And there's this tension now generationally. And the baby boomers, they've overstayed their welcome by about 10 years traditionally. If you think about it, our median age is probably 75 in management in America today.
Yeah.
Corporately, not necessarily entrepreneurs. They're a much younger
Right.
group of people. But so data analytics, project management, and your software. Let's talk about your software a little bit, because I don't know that I've done a very good job of giving you a platform to explain everything that you get involved with, and I want to change that. But what does your software package do?
So our software is a platform for manufacturers to engage with their suppliers so that they can essentially project manage the whole process of procuring parts. It's not as simple as I go to Amazon and I buy a part, I add it to my shopping cart and it shows up. In the manufacturing world, there's regulations, there's quality requirements, there's paperwork, there's, certifications. There's a lot that goes into it. And companies can't afford to not have visibility into those things where they're at. And especially now where lead times are so long and raw material is harder to get, and you have COVID shutting China down, and all of these things are impacting the ability for manufacturers to get parts on time from their suppliers. So anything you can do to identify an issue early, or know if somebody's late to delivering a task, and you can pick up the phone and take action against those things. I think that visibility is really important for manufacturers to do what they want, which is ship parts that are high quality to their customers.
So if I say 2019 and earlier, in other words, prior to COVID, we were fat, dumb, and happy. We didn't realize this was an issue. But COVID and the pandemic, the last 30 months, call it, the supply chain is broken.
It's a mess.
And we never knew it was.
No.
Am I wrong with that? We thought everything was fine.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, single source, having, one, you always have, you might only have one supplier and they're on the other side of the country, or other side of the world, I'm sorry. And it was okay because, and lean, right? Like we want to keep just in time inventory and make sure that we're not stocking parts, and all of that, when that rule book got thrown out the window when COVID hit. And I think it takes time to recover, because you can't just go down the street and find the supplier. I think it's hard you can't Google them. You can't find people that easily. And then it takes time to get people up and running to make those parts. And so even if you've adjusted, it's still going to take years to get to a point where you're now managing your supply chain with risk.
I've always, I agree with that 100%,
Avoiding.
and I've always felt that way, but the pandemic really highlighted it when 80% of the antibiotics that are required in the United States are made in China.
Yeah.
No disrespect to China or anybody, but having a sole source for something like that, forget it. Get out of here.
Yeah, agreed. I'm a big fan of like in region for region. Like I don't have anything against any other country, but
So
you know,
let's stay with that for a second. In region for region, I translate that in a perhaps different way, but what I've felt is that the currency that you deal with, so the euro,
mhm,
that should be the community in which you find your raw materials, where you do your manufacturing, where you do your retailing, all within that one zone.
mhm,
So when we move from the euro to the US dollar, the same thing's duplicated in the United States with the US dollar and anybody that trades in the US. And then we used to have the Japanese yen, maybe it's the
mhm.
renminbi, but there's an Asian bloc, and maybe there'll be a fourth or fifth axis in the world. But through globalization, none of that was considered. It was strictly, let's make money. And the guise is we're going to reduce the poverty level worldwide. We're going to extend the lifespan worldwide, World Economic Forum type of thinking,
Mhm.
and didn't realize how vulnerable we were.
Yeah.
And that vulnerability, I don't know it's really settled in yet. We're desperately trying to get back to where we were before, but haven't taken advantage of the wonderful opportunity to change what wasn't working previously, kind of like what you do.
Yeah. I think I think it'll be interesting to see if change sticks.
Yeah, I agree.
I
Yeah, you're
think
as cynical as
leaders are
I am.
thinking differently,
That's not good. You know, you
but
can't.
I'm hoping. But I just, I think people have been trained for so long to think cheap price over looking at like total landed cost, or um, how do I manage things with the whole consideration of avoiding risk? You know what I mean? Like how do you mitigate risk is really where it's at. And I think we'll see. I hope that people think differently and that they change, but I have a fear that they set in ways.
I think there's a whole sector of society that is thinking very much differently, but unfortunately, it's not the mass. And until we get into the lifelong learning circumstance, until people open up and be vulnerable to their inadequacies, that's a tough place to be. But we have such potential. And potential, you've heard my throwaway. If somebody tells you got potential and you're 16 years old, it's wonderful. You smile from ear to ear because it's a hell of a compliment. But if the same person tells you the same thing and you're 66, what the hell you been doing the last 50 years? You know? So the first thing is, how do you identify your potential individually? Nobody's asking us to do that.
No.
How does a company define the functions and the requirements to fulfill that function inside the company? They don't do that today. Here's the task.
No. It's tasks. And I think there's with every function, there should be some room for doing continuous improvement. And I don't think that's carved out at all either. Because I think every function should be thinking about, what's my process? Is it on time? How do I improve it? Is it to quality? Am I doing a lot of rework? How do I reduce that? Like, and have freedom in your day to be able to do that. I think there's too much acceptance, or too much like people that have busy with meetings all day, right? Like that's perceived as being a good thing. If you're responding to emails at all hours of the night, that's perceived as being a good thing, as opposed to really define what you want me to do and then give me the space to get it done and help me when I need it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
funny.
I think-
I think, I took a minor in computer science in the 60s, which means I learned how to wire unit record equipment, right? I was on the internet in 1973 before it really was. And it was amazing because you didn't get a million responses. You got who you wanted right now.
Mhm.
And look how difficult it is for people to have access, even though we've got Google, even though we've got all manner of other things out there. It's really hard to find answers to real problems.
That's true.
No, what's the capital of China? Boom, I can get it. Google. Wikipedia can give me all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
Why are the satellites eroding in their orbit and ultimately going to be coming back to the planet? I think that's something that we should be paying attention to because there's so many thousands up there, but I don't know of anybody looking at that.
Yeah.
In the world that I work in, construction equipment parts, supply chain is a mess, absolutely total mess.
Yeah.
And that, what did you call it, in country, for country type of thing? I'm
Yeah.
misstating it, but is that truly going to happen?
I think that's the win-win.
Do we really have any other choice?
No, I mean, not if we're gonna avoid this catastrophe, this mess again. I think, it doesn't need to be a complete swing of the pendulum in the other direction. But maybe a 60-40 or a 70-30 or, something along those lines. You should have a plan where you can get something down the street that should be available to you.
Yeah. Well, and perhaps we're going to also transition into, cost of goods sold type of thing. Let's go for the cheapest. Maybe we're going to start looking at the value of a life cycle.
Absolutely.
That would be nice.
And total landed cost, even that's not even necessarily talked about. It's everything's compartmentalized. So the transportation, and I don't know of any company that knows how to capture the costs wasted because you have people waiting around doing nothing while you're waiting for parts. Where does that get factored into the price of the part?
Yeah. Or the price of the labor job or manufacturing job,
Yes.
It's kind of strange. So tell me what, in your view, landed cost consists of.
Well, the easiest is you've got the part price, you've got the transportation, you've got any other fees that I would assume currency changes should go in there too. Although I don't have that financial background to talk to it. The quality, what's your defect rate? I think that should be part of it as well. And there's got to be some way to come up with a equation to measure all of that.
So if we look at landed cost then in that definition, which step along the way makes the most money?
Makes the most money is
Yep.
when it's shipped.
Which one makes the biggest percentage of the profit that's in that supply chain? Is it the producer? Is it the distributor, the transport?
Oh, I didn't understand.
Who makes the most money?
Well, I would assume the final OEM is going to have the best profit. Although the way transportation is these days, I think they're really taking advantage of the situation. Transportation costs have gone up significantly.
Transportation and distribution typically are the ones that make all the money. And the best example is farming. The farmer doesn't make the most money in that process.
Mhm.
And now they're talking about vertical farming. Have you heard about this?
No.
10 acres of land
Okay.
can develop a certain amount of food locally. Takes transportation out of it altogether.
Oh, that's cool.
And
Why not?
the product goes down between a third and a half.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So that's another piece of this puzzle that's coming out with, it started with industrial engineering. They really wanted to, in the old days, do things better.
Mhm.
But we didn't, everything was by pencil. You know, as Alex Schussler at Smart Equip says, we're moving from paper to glass. We're not changing anything. We're changing the vehicle. It's not a piece of paper, 6 parts that you fill out by pen. It's now a screen. We put the template up there and you fill it in with a keyboard. Didn't change anything.
No.
And that's the trouble with most change, which is why I think people become cynical and jaded was the word you used. You know,
Mhm.
it's tough.
Yeah, it is tough.
How many people do what you do?
Oh, that's a good question.
I don't think there's
I
many.
don't know if I have.
I don't think there's many.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it's a common thing to know technology, data, and business.
So we got to get your message or whatever out to more people so that they could start taking advantage of the benefits that you provide. Because I truly believe you're providing unbelievable benefits for your clients and for everybody that's out there. That even the software package with manufacturers, who would have thought?
Yeah.
Now, with all those variables, and the one that you've mentioned that gets my attention the most is the regulatory changes. Because we're being told how to make things by people that have never made anything in their life. Right.
Yep.
So
Yep,
from
and that's gonna get.
you think it's going
I
to get worse?
imagine it's gonna get worse. Yep. I think carbon and tracking how much carbon is contributing. I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a thing someday.
Interesting. Yes, the week yesterday or the day before, the World Economic Forum came out with their latest report. This is a group in Switzerland that's basically lobbying people. And they've come to the conclusion, in our climate change carbon world, our green pursuit, whatever label you want to put on it.
Yep.
We only have one possible solution. We have to reduce the number of vehicles on the roads. We don't have enough mines to finally acknowledging we don't have enough mines with the minerals
For
to make what we need for and not just batteries, but batteries is a big one. That's obvious for everybody.
Right.
Oh, we don't have the electrical grid to power all this EV stuff. Oh, the electrical grid we do have is driven still 60 to 70% by coal and oil. Oh, got to take cars off the road. And the statistic that came by, it's a riot. Cars are only used 4% of the time.
Okay.
So if you've got a half-hour commute to your job,
Yeah.
it's an hour a day you're using your car. Okay, so you'll shop and you'll put some other. So that's 1 hour out of 24. That's 4%.
Wow. When you put it like that, it's
So what they're saying is, well, we need to have your car. You need to share your car. You and your neighbors, you only need one car out of the 5. Get rid of those 4 and we don't have a problem anymore. Honest to goodness, that's exactly what they put forward.
Are they going to change like the fact that people work standard hours and need their vehicles at the same time?
But that's part and parcel of what you do. Supply chain issues, lean issues. Six Sigma was a wonderful tool.
Yeah.
Have you done much with 5S and 7S since? Them at all?
I don't do 5S was very company wise. Yes, you still see a lot of 5S. I think it makes sense. In my personal life, I like to use 5S because when I am cooking dinner, I love to cook. That's my passion. And I have a pantry in my basement and everything is labeled and in boxes and it's beautiful and I can find what I need and like that. So
you're an organized neat freak.
No, not by
any measure. Okay.
No, I'm not. I am not a neat freak.
But you're an organizational freak.
But for something like that I care about, that I want, what do I love about cooking? I like cooking. I don't like finding my stuff. Right. So, it's important enough to me that I organize it, it stayed organized, and that's
Do you have your pantry on the computer?
no.
1973, this guy, that IP Sharp was the company that was the first one that was on the internet with me. They had a routine on your fridge and recipes. And when you did your meal, you said, I'm doing this recipe, and it updated the inventory, and it gave you a shopping list every week that your fridge needed to be replenished with this, that, and the other thing.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's 50 years ago. Do you know anybody that uses anything like that today?
No.
No.
Because
Takes
we're
all the fun
human.
out of it. Takes all the fun out
We're
of it.
spontaneous. We
Yeah,
want to change our mind.
Yeah, yeah. Which is why that engagement that you talked about a long time ago, keeping people's interest, because some of these things take a long time to fix or solve or create. But we don't have the patience for that
No.
in
No,
almost every aspect of life. Do you know who George Carlin was, the comedian?
Mhm.
He said, what's the matter with us? Wherever we are, we want to be somewhere else. You're at home, you want to go to work. You're at work, you want to go to lunch. You go to come back from lunch, you want to get back to work. You want to go to, what's wrong with us? It's true.
It's true.
That book Indistractable is kind of interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. What I appreciate about it is it's small bites of very actionable things you can do.
Yeah, it changed how I organize my day altogether.
Mm-hmm.
I no longer deal with to-do lists that are tasks. I
Yeah.
deal with to-do lists are blocks of time. And it takes the stress out of the day altogether. It's remarkable.
It's definitely something I need to do more consistently, because 2 weeks ago I had my week planned, and at the end of the week I felt really accomplished. This past week I did not. I spent my Sunday doing Sunday fun day things and not prepping. And I can feel it.
Well, you have a family, you have a husband, you have children,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So, it's not just a function of performing business activities or
Yeah.
money-making activities that,
It's
there's,
carving out.
yeah. And I think that's another thing I think that happened in the pandemic. Maybe you can express your opinion on that. I hope a lot of people reevaluated their lives and looked and said, okay, this is valuable. I want to repeat that. This I don't want to keep doing.
Yeah.
I'd hope everybody did that. I'm afraid they didn't, but it's kind of an interesting time. You have unbelievable tools, abilities to bring to the market. I want to help you get it there.
Thank you.
And if you have time, pick a subject, give me a blog, and then we'll do a podcast and promote it
Okay.
as to, how we can take advantage of this. What do you think of this kind of a candid conversation?
Oh, I think it's great. I love the casual nature. I love the direction. It's interesting because you never know where the conversation is going to go, and then you bring it right back to where it was. And I think it's a lot of fun.
We gotta explore the boundaries for the room. I call it getting high enough you can look over the wall. We have no idea what's out there, right?
Yeah. Yep.
There's something wrong with me, kid, I'll tell you. What, how would you like to close this? You got any words, wise comments, or real interesting nuggets that you'd like to pass across to anybody?
Well, I think when it comes back down to like driving change, and how do you get people to align with you? I think the first thing that I recommend doing, no matter what, is to take the time to map out the details of the process in its current state. And you gain an understanding of what that is. First of all, if you can get data, if it's available, then you can help expose where some of the issues are with the current state. But the most important thing you gain from that is you gain a relationship with the stakeholders that are doing that process on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Because now you've taken the time to understand what it's like to walk in their shoes. And that that relationship that gets established, that trust, that empathy, I think goes a long way in being able to drive change.
Process mapping
Mhm.
is absolutely critical. And the thing that I think that appeals to me about it is that the people that are doing the job, who know everything about it better than anybody else, they're fundamental. They're an absolute requirement of a process map.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're engaged. And in many cases, it's the first time they've ever been asked, how should we do this? How do we do this?
Yeah.
It's really kind of strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, taking stickies and putting them all around the room. This is the project, here's the decision point. Here's your options. Here's if this, then that, I love those things.
I love them too. And
There's something wrong with us, Sarah, because that's
for my
really,
software,
that's
what
really detailed, baby.
but you have to be, because if you don't understand it, you'll miss something.
Of course. Have you heard the story about Michelangelo? He's painting the Sistine Chapel, the roof, right?
Mhm.
And the Pope at the time, I think his name was Leo, and Leo kept coming out and said, when are you going to be finished? When I'm done.
Yeah.
The Pope was really upset one day. He comes out and Michelangelo's up in the scaffolding. He has to come down. And the Pope looks at him. He said, when are you going to be done? When I'm finished. He said, well, what's the problem? He said, well, this is religion. There's God. And Michelangelo says, God is there. He's in the details. And the details nobody really thinks about.
No.
This is a beautiful painting. Imagine how long it took. Here's a beautiful piece of music. How did you put that together? Here's a beautiful computer program. Wow. How did I get that part out of the warehouse? How did I get that part into the warehouse?
Mhm.
Whoa. Well, I ordered it. It showed up at my front door. Congratulations. What went behind that?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, process mapping. So there's the message. Why don't you write a blog on process mapping?
Okay.
That'd be some, and kind of a follow the bouncing ball. Here's how you do it.
Yeah.
And I would suggest to you or submit to you, maybe you want to say, if anybody's got a problem, here's an email.
Okay.
And then we'll see if anybody responds to you.
Okay.
I sure appreciate the time, Sarah, and your insight. And I hope everybody listening has gained something. Sarah's a particularly talented young lady. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.
And I look forward to doing many more things with you.
Awesome. Me too.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Mahalo.